I think there was a lot of exploration in the 90s. There was this huge grunge thing going on where you went from people that were rock stars, like, you know, you had the Mick Jaggers, and then we get to the 90s and everybody in a band looked like the roadie. I look at my first album and I think, oh my gosh, I tried so hard not to project myself as being pretty, because I wanted to be taken seriously. I wanted to be perceived as a strong artist, not as some tart or some gorgeous modelly, you know. And I think there was a lot of that, you know, with the exception of video starting to become huge with Madonna and Paula Abdul and dancing and that kind of thing. Women were, you know, out there trying to rock it, you know, trying to be like the stepchildren of Stevie Nicks and Chrissie Hynde. And you had some really strong, very opinionated women in the 90s who were, I mean, Alanis Morissette was definitely somebody who, she held her own, you know, without using anything other than her voice and her energy. And that was a big thing, you know. So, and Lauryn Hill came out of that. And there was a lot of what I feel like were strong female people to look at and say, yeah, that's kind of where I want to be. My early beginnings, I moved to LA and I got some session work. I had a tape of some songs and some demos, and I started getting hired to do some session work, and I got hired to do a record date for Johnny Mathis, and I overheard some singers talking about the Michael Jackson tour. So I crashed the audition, and I wound up getting it. And then when I came home, there was this, you know, a lot of attention on the backup singer that had sung for Michael Jackson, and a lot of interest in my making a pop record, like a dance, kind of like Paula Abdul or Lisa Lisa and the Cult Jam, what was happening then, Madonna. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do, you know, the stuff I'm doing now. And I had a demo, and after being turned down by every record label, having like played the piano and played the guitar and done gigs and been giving a ton of demo deals, I wound up going to a party and giving my tape to a producer, and he got me signed. But what he loved about it was the songs on the demo, which had been done basically on a computer. And we wound up making that record, and it did sound much like an 80s kind of Sting record. And when I handed it in, I just said, look, you know, we can't put this out. It's a giant snore. I think you can get it on eBay for like $100. It was a really heady time in that, you know, I'd had this album that I had sort of begged the record label not to put out, and then I sat around for a really long time, went back to waiting tables, and started hearing around town that I was about to be dropped. And I joined a band called Toy Matinee, and I became friends with the front singer, who said, hey, you know, we're getting together Tuesday night at Bill Bottrell's studio. Why don't you come out? I went out. I was the only girl, and it was David and David and Kevin Gilbert from Toy Matinee, and Dan Swartz, this great bass player, and Brian McLeod, who had been in Wire Train, and just a bunch of people that were extremely talented, but that sort of had fallen between the cracks. And there was this sort of us against them attitude, like we're so much more talented than what's happening at radio. And, you know, it was kind of elitist, and also a lot of conspiracy theorizing and a lot of hanging out in bars till like 4 in the morning. And I just was swept up in all of it and felt like, oh, these are my people. And so I went to a couple of Tuesday nights, and then shortly after that, Bill, the producer, said, hey, let's make a solo record on you. We went to the label. The 90s was kind of amazing in that there were a lot of boutique labels that we would remember from like the 60s and 70s that, you know, like Elektra and Geffen and A&M and Virgin, and, you know, they were the record labels that carried like the artists like Joni Mitchell and Crosby, Stills and Nash and James Taylor, and you know, they really represented artistry. And then the big conglomerates started swallowing up the small labels. In fact, I was on A&M, which Interscope swallowed up A&M, and I think it became a practice to not, you know, to give a young artist maybe 1 or 2 chances and then move on to the next. And my first record, we put out Run Baby Run, which I'm not sure what it did. And then the second single was Leaving Las Vegas, which I think soared straight up to 58. And then the last-ditch effort was All I Want to Do. And then that became like a huge hit. And that was not even a song to me that, I mean, that was one that I'd sort of thought we should have left off the album, and then it became like the big hit. So, you know, you never know. I was 30 when that first record came out, and it's funny because there you know, the first few years of that, I felt like, gosh, I wish I would have gotten here earlier. I wish I would have been like 18, you know. But as you get older and you become more philosophical, you start to realize if you'd been younger, these things wouldn't have fallen together. That, you know, who knows what it would have looked like? And would you have been able to hold it when you were 18? Would you have known what you knew? You know, I'd already had real jobs by the time I was 30. Like, I had been a school teacher. And so when I actually finally made it, it was all about the work. The work. It had to be great. It had to be credible. It had to have legs, have meaning. And so I probably didn't enjoy it as much as I could have. But it was what it was, and I was where I was because of what I'd already gone through. And, you know, I looked at Stevie Nicks and thought, well, she was 28 or 29. Okay, that's okay. It was interesting. I mean, it was for me, very mind expansive to actually work with people and throw in lyric ideas and stuff. I'd never done anything like that. And it was overall a good experience. Not sure I'd do it again, but that's because I know more now, you know. Some of the guys in the band in the group were resentful that they weren't dragged along as the band. And, you know, initially when I'd asked everyone to come out on the road, they all had their own things going. But I don't think anybody thought the record was going to take off. So then when it did take off and everybody wanted to be in the band, I already had a band that I wanted to be loyal to. And people's feelings got hurt, and nobody defended me. That was the other thing. But the band, I mean, the album was produced by Bill Bottrell, and he did produce it in the way that a conventional producer does produce it, where he dictated who came in and out. It wasn't a jam session. It wasn't a series of jam sessions. It was named that because I wanted to honor the initial start. But, you know, hindsight's 20/20. But it did burn me. You know, there wasn't anybody that stuck up for me. And that's why I think the second record did give me the opportunity to sort of clear up some misnomers. All I Want to Do came out. The record became so huge, and clearly it had my name on it. And there were people that speculated about whether the guys made the record for me. I think the thing that I wanted to do on the second record was to do anything but part 2 of the Tuesday Night Music Club record. I was really ready to put that album away, and I was ready to put away everything that went along with it. All the ugliness, all the stories that were built around it. And I had really kind of dug, you know, a place in the sand to kind of hide. And when I went in to make the second record, I felt like this is my opportunity to just satisfy myself. And I called my friend Jeff and said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a producer. Will you come down and let's just record like we do? And that's how we did it. And it was just an amazing experience. For one thing, we were in New Orleans. We weren't around anything that even remotely felt like the industry or anything that felt normal, or it just was it was like an oasis. Full of a lot of creative energy. I mean, New Orleans already kind of wields that. So we just really embraced where we were, and we embraced the incredible surroundings of this antebellum mansion that was a studio, and went to work. And before we knew it, we had, you know, a bunch of songs, and we're like, okay, this is it. Let's put it out, see what happens. If It Makes You Happy was really, I think, you know, it was the answer to all the people that were not only naysayers, but the people that were kind of propagating falsehoods, that were making a ton of money off the first record. You know, the book was a heavy song about being betrayed. Every Day is a Winding Road actually was the result of knowing somebody that was a dear friend who just couldn't handle the heaviness of life, and he hung himself. I mean, there was a lot of heaviness on that record, but masked in, you know, grungy, kind of raw, very imperfect recordings and the sonics of it just kind of in your face. And I think it really served the heaviness of the lyrics to be able to create a backdrop that was inviting. When my second record came out, there really the only place to buy records in my hometown and a lot of other towns across America is Walmart. And they banned that record because I had a song on it called Love is a Good Thing. And there had been a piece in the press about I think a kid, I can't, to be perfectly honest, I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but a kid getting a hold of a gun that was bought at Walmart. And it was actually, I think, the cop killer bullets that were bought at Walmart. And when they heard the song, it's referenced. And when they heard the song, they offered us the opportunity for me to change it to Kmart or another outlet. And then they would carry it. But I couldn't do that in good conscience. And so they didn't carry the record, which at that time, you know, that was a huge portion of sales that I missed out on. But, you know, that was the beginning of some hard decisions that you make throughout your career based on integrity or truth, you know. And, you know, now I look back and think, well, all these things that were so precious at the time, you know, talking about the Dixie Chicks, now you can say whatever you damn well please. And you would be hard put to find a huge chasm of people or population of people that would, you know, go out and steamroll over your albums like they did the Dixie Chicks or like Walmart did to me because of social media. But back then, when there wasn't social media, it was a big deal. It's hard to say, okay, this is my best work, because it would be like saying, well, I really love my third child. Maybe a little bit more than my fourth child, but I like my fourth child. You know what I mean? It's like, how I relate to my records is the body experience, like the feeling I get in my body. And I don't listen to my albums. On this record, though, that we made just recently, the Be Myself record, I did go back and listen to some of it because I wanted to remind myself of the spirit of it. I didn't want to make a record this time that felt any way, shape, or form calculated or crafted. And that's what the second record was completely not crafted and just totally present and just really speaking my mind and heart and physicality on and putting it on tape. And I hear the songs and I do feel that. I feel exactly the emotion that went into making it. And I feel that way about the Globe sessions. And I love the Globe sessions for the reasons that I love the second record. That what I experience on it is exactly what I was experiencing when I walked into the studio and started writing those songs. I mean, a lot of heartache and a loving, tumultuous relationship ending and the disappointment of that and the vulnerability, and that's all there on that record. I don't know what the second record did except to say, for me, it gave me a new start. And what I find is there are people that are loyal to you no matter what, and then there are people that are going to be naysayers no matter what. Why that is, I don't know. You know, it's a little bit like when a reviewer sits in your audience, they bring to their review how they feel about what you represent to them, you know. And I don't know. I will say that the second record was the last time I read a review. I just have never, from that moment forward, going in there and saying, okay, I'm doing this for myself. And what anybody else thinks about it, that's not my world. So, and I don't read reviews. I just don't delve into it. My management is really good about saying, you got a great review and blah, blah, blah. And my pat answer is, oh, that's good. Awesome. But I listen to the Come On, Come On record and I feel the $1.5 million spent on a record that I could not finish. The Come On, Come On record came on the heels of touring Two-Cent Music Club, going in, making the Sheryl Crow record, touring it. Immediately on the heels of that, going to New York and making the Globe sessions, and then immediately going on the road. And then I thought, okay, we've been out for, 6-7 years. I'm going to go in and make another record, and then I'm going to take some time off. And that compounded with the fact that I was turning 40 that year, and what was at pop radio was like Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, all these girls, like they were 18. And here I'm turning 40. And I'm not married now, I haven't had kids. So I just felt like, oh my God, I'm old, and I'm not gonna be relevant anymore, and I haven't had kids, and I can't take off time until I've made this record. And it was just like a giant snowball of stress that really undermined my being able to be inspired. And I really spent the better part of 8 months not finishing anything. And we wound up in New York at Avatar Studios, and Chrissy Hine was there, and I was going to have her sing on something, but I was just like, I can't finish this record. And she's like, what are you doing? You know, music is not your life. It is something you do. And this isn't your life. Step away. And she really encouraged me to just move away from it. And she told me about how when she had her daughters, she took 8 years off, didn't do any music. She was there for her kids. And when she came back, music was still there. She picked it up where she left it off. And so that really kind of changed things for me. And I came back later on and finished it. And it was great. It actually wound up being, I turned 40, and it was the best year I ever had. And the record did well, and, you know, all was good and right in the world again. But there was definitely a little come to Jesus in there. Like, what is going on? I think I was just floundering in the fact that I didn't have any life experiences to pull from other than being exhausted and being on the road. And I just needed to take some time off and actually have some living time so that I could come back in and really have something to say. And I wound up just letting go. I let go of my career. I let go of music. I let go of this pressure I was putting on myself to always be productive. And I got out my dirt bike, and I started doing things that I had always loved doing. Went on the road, and we went to every dirt bike track. I started surfing. And I mean, it was just like a year of, hey, life isn't over just because you're 40. And you still have something to say, even though what's happening at radio is not at all what you do, and it's geared younger and younger and younger. And what was happening at that moment, I think, was the beginning of music shifting towards kids. Music became this commodity that was constantly being tested. Like a record label will never put out a song without testing it at different demographics and different bases. And that was foreign to me, you know, because we started in a van and we played for 10 people, and then we played for 40 people, and then we played for 100 people, and then we got an RV, and then we got a tour bus. And that way of touring was so much like what I had grown up thinking that it was going to be like. And now suddenly you had pop stars being created and being fashioned, and it was really foreign. And I was already at that moment sort of a dinosaur in the fact that I was older, and I was making sort of rock music, and that was being kind of pushed to the side. And now we're concentrating on the visible aspects of the female artist, much more than the male artist. And when I handed in the record, I was at Interscope, and Interscope still was like, we don't know what we're doing with this artist. We have no idea. We cannot relate to, I mean, we're into the Pussycat Dolls and No Doubt, and what do we do with this? So the fact that they did get a hit out of it was great, because they were in no way, shape, or form big Sheryl Crow fans. That record did have a lot of personalities on it. I mean, I have been just undeservedly embraced by so many of my heroes. It's just unbelievable. I have so many incredible stories, but Stevie is one of them. I mean, she's been a huge, not only a huge hero for me, but also just an amazing friend, and a generous spirit, you know, a really encourager, and just a great inspiration. And Liz Phair actually was in the studio next to me, and we'd done some dates on Lilith Fair. So it's fun when you're recording. I mean, it was fun back then, particularly because people worked in recording studios. They didn't work on Pro Tools. They didn't work in their own homes. And so you could be walking down the hall and say, hey, come in and sing on blah, blah, blah. And, you know, that's what makes it really fun. Lenny Kravitz is on the record even. So to be able to call in friends, and I mean, it really makes it just makes it feel more like what you think music is going to be like, where you've got a bunch of people in studios coming in and out of each other's rooms and contributing and stuff. And it really was like that. It took me a while to understand that saying no and disappointing people was the reality of living, and that all the saying yes to every single thing anybody ever wanted me to do was not going to earn their love, but it was going to exhaust me and ultimately make me sick. And that's where I wound up. So Detours I made after I was finished with breast cancer treatment. And it was kind of the first time that I looked at my work, being my songwriting, my touring, my recording, all that career-oriented stuff, as being something I needed to not run to. Because it had always been this thing since I was little that I identified myself with. I identified myself as a musician, as a songwriter, as a productive person. And that, I think, sometimes became a great place to hide, to not deal with things. And when I had a really major kind of public breakup, and then I got diagnosed, and suddenly I was like fodder for tabloids, and the first thing I wanted to do was, sit down and start writing and make a record. And that is, I think, sometimes a distraction from actually holding an emotion, just really sitting with it and being in it and being sad and mad and all those things and being scared and make it go away. That song is really about having cancer. I'm a nice person. I'm a healthy person. How did this happen? The whole album, I guess, is just about the fact that as much as we think we control all the events in our lives, we really have no control over much at all. I had a lot of people after I made the record and was more visible, because I'd really kind of hit out at the farm. I had people coming up to me, like in Starbucks or in the women's bathroom at the airport, saying, I'm a cancer survivor, I had breast cancer, and talking to me about their experience. And it is an odd thing that the community of particularly breast cancer survivors, they find each other, and there is a common language there about nourishing and nourishment and self-nurturing and the lack thereof when it comes to women. We're born to procreate and to nurture on the breast, to nourish on the breast, and yet we're conditioned to never take care of ourselves. We put everybody first. We take care of it. We feed our kids. We get their sports clothes washed. We get them off to ballet, and at the end of the day, we fall into bed, and did we have a minute to ourselves? And we're taking care of our husbands, and we're balancing the checkbooks, and all these things that may sound stereotypical, but they really are the reality of being a woman. And even as a working woman, you're working and you're doing all these things. And I kept hearing over and over again from women, I had to really learn how to take care of myself. I had to learn how to put my oxygen mask on first before I put it on my child or anybody else. And that song became sort of a mantra, and I still have a lot of women who come up and talk to me about it. And that is a gift to me. I mean, that is in no way, shape, or form an annoyance. I have a lot of sweet memories that revolve around the Detours record because my son, he was 3 months old. We had a crib bolted down in the bus, and he took his first steps at Ellen DeGeneres, and everything was about him, and that music felt important to me. Although it didn't jump off the shelves at Tower Records, it meant something to me, and we made it out at the farm, and I brought in Bill Bottrell for my first record, and it was very immediate. I was able to just really put it all out there, and I felt like I covered everything on that record. Having had President Bush take us into a war that nobody really knew what it was based on, and there was a lot of uncertainty and a lot of mistrust, compounded with, the Al Gore environmental, all that information coming out, and to be looking, in the face of a little 3-month-old and thinking, what are we going to do about what kind of world you inherit? Everything felt so much more immediate and so much more urgent, so the themes on the record are really from that place of feeling extremely open and vulnerable and wide awake. And then I handed it into Interscope, and they're like, it's a lovely record, but nobody wants to hear this kind of stuff. And so I was just like, but I still contend that there's stuff on that record that has its place. To me, one of the gifts of music is that you touch on something. It is a touchstone. It's something that resonates in people as giving voice to the common experience or the universal, the collective experience. And that's why music has meant so much throughout history for giving a voice to like generations of people. I don't know what it's doing now because of the commerciality of it. Nowadays, your brand has to be so big that people go buy your stuff because you're larger than life, and that would be such a bummer for me. I couldn't handle it. I have tried for years to get Bobby, Kid Rock, to do like a full duets record with me because I'm like, let's be George and Tammy, but like this sort of Americana version of it. My moving to Nashville 11 years ago and having so many people come up to me and say, you know, you need to make a record for the country format. You live here. You've had all these songs that have inspired, you know, girls at country. Brad Paisley initially came up to me and said, you really need to make a country record. You need to make a record for our format. And so I did. And he was really instrumental in helping me get it together. And the country record I wanted to make was more in the line of like Let It Bleed or Exile or, you know, Flying Grievous Angel, something like that. I got a little bit away from that, but, you know, nonetheless, I did do what I wanted to do on that record, which was to sit down with Nashville writers and experience that crafting a song. I mean, it was definitely a new experience. Everybody in Nashville writes in threes, so I would go in and there'd be 2 songwriters there, and they would kind of put together a few little ideas that sound like Sheryl Crow songs, and I actually had to learn how to say, that's not for me, you know, or how about this, you know, and it was good. I mean, it was really good for me to sort of get out of my comfort zone and stretch myself, and I feel like some of the lyrics on it were some of the best that I've written. I think what I didn't really realize is that not only did I not fit in there as far as what the format is now, that women don't hold a place at country radio. And the format is such that there's a lot of work that goes into it that's much more commerce-based than just going out and playing music. And it was, you know, I loved making the record, but the format is a place that I definitely don't belong. You know, I do feel like I have a lot of country influences in my music, but like I said, the country influences that I have are not necessarily what's happening at country radio. So there wasn't really a fit there. And the people that are on that record really, to me, are the left of center crowd. You know, the Chris Stapleton who, he doesn't really, to me, represent what's happening at country, and thank God he's getting played. And Brandy Clark, who's just amazing, and thank God she's getting her notoriety. And Ashley Monroe, who's like the real deal Holyfield, you know, and she's getting a name. And, of course, Vince Gill, I mean, he's bigger than country. So I really love the people that are on the record. And, of course, Zach Brown, who's just a precious human being. So, I mean, that's what keeps me optimistic and loving doing it still, is the fact that I turn on Lightning 100 in Nashville, and I am Shazamming stuff like, who's this? Oh, my gosh, I got to get this record. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited about what I hear. I'm excited about new music that's coming out, and it's not necessarily coming from the, you know, the conventional avenues that we grew up with. It's coming from, you know, Sirius Radio and, for better or worse, Spotify and, you know, the playlist that we make. We are doing the Outlaws Tour this summer, and that is going to be amazeballs. I am going to be having so much fun this summer just being out with people that are, who've been doing it forever, and then people who are just starting out, and they're all people that I can tell just live it and breathe it and eat it and love it. Just, you know, real music lovers, musicians, the Avett Brothers, Sturgill Simpson, obviously, Willie. Bob Dylan's going to do a few things. We hear maybe Neil might come in and off of it. I mean, just there's an amazing roster of people. My Morning Jacket, just people that I personally can't wait to see. So I'm going to have a great time. I've chosen to just embrace being my age and to be older. And I know that there is a population of people out there that will respect that and like that and be drawn to it. There are also people that will look at my face and go, she's old and I'm not going to buy her record. I feel an immense amount of liberation being my age. You know, with regard to sexism and with regard to women in power, the greatest power you will ever exemplify is the power of integrity and the power of being awake and being present and having something to say and not projecting sex and sexuality as your only means of power. And I fear that for young women now that seems to be projected as what power looks like. And I fear that for young boys or men, that these images that our pop stars project, that a man thinks that that's what beauty is, or a young boy thinks that that's what beauty is, and that's what strength is. And in my estimation, we as women need to embrace who we are and empower that aspect. Empower the fact that we're older and that we have something to say, and that there's a whole other population in the world of people that are adults who are on a trajectory of truth that can relate to the images of women who are my age and younger and older who do have something to say and that do project sensuality in a way that is powerful and not sexualized. The sound of this record is largely reminiscent of my earlier stuff because I worked with my old buddy, Jeff Trott, who had just moved to Nashville. We recorded this album in my barn in Nashville in between school drop-off in the morning and dinner time. So it was very civilized. I took the kids to school. Jeff took his kids to school. I would work out a little bit, meditate, and then we'd get together around 10 and I'd pick up the kids, bring them back to the studio, and then at 5:30, break for dinner. And within about a month, we had a whole record done. The album is called Be Myself because that song wound up at the end really speaking for the whole album. This album is about as close to a diary for me as possible. The song Heartbeat Away, it wound up being kind of prescient. It really spawned from all the fear that was being wielded in the campaign. And Russia just made an appearance because that seemed to be the alter ego of evil and mystery. And that wasn't even a conversation yet. It's weird how songs will do that, that something that's in the ether that you don't really recognize can find its way, into song form. I'm psychic. What can I say? A lot of what is on the album really documents my feeling about social media and what that's doing to us as a civilization, and the fact that we have these gadgets that are supposed to be connecting us, and yet they're creating a giant disconnect. They're also, I think, creating a disconnect with us and our emotions. It's easy to distract yourself from any type of feeling when you could go to this thing. That had a presence on the record, as well as what was going on sociopolitically, what the campaign was doing to our humanity, the fact that we couldn't really discuss our differences, and still can't, without becoming so volatile, and our conversations became void of reason and empathy, and that's something I think that we're still all struggling with. And so a lot of these themes were big themes that kind of dictated the content of the record. I'm hoping at the end of the day that what I'm doing is merely making a comment as opposed to picking a side. People will make out of the songs what they want to, according to how they feel about me. Everything is so cut and dry now. There's so defined sides that there will be people that maybe would like my music, except they're not going to like me, whether they like it or not. I'm very nervous about raising my kids during this period and what ultimately might be the way of the future. Now, with cyberbullying, it's not about a kid walking up to you and telling you're ugly. You can run a whole campaign with a lot of kids against one kid, and it can make the difference between a kid feeling great about themselves or a kid taking his life. And we have to protect our kids from that. That is the dialogue that has to be happening now, 24/7. But, all that being said, that's what it means to be an adult, a parent who is present and who is invested. Everything that is going on in my life is always right there on the record. Sometimes it's more masked, but this record is definitely, there's not any masking on it. So, yeah, I think the next record will be as immediate as this record is, just by virtue of the fact that as an artist, I feel really I feel a sense of urgency to write about what's happening. I just can't seem to shake it off. It's just there all the time, and it would seem silly to ignore the elephant in the room.